Kevin Kelly, senior maverick at Wired Magazine and evangelist of the social web. Kevin, you went online in the early 80s. You were one of the founders of The Well. You pioneered the idea of the social. Today, though, the social has become huge. What's changed in the last 20 years? Why is Facebook different? Why is Twitter different? Or is indeed these new social businesses, are they different from what you were pioneering in the 80s?
I think the way in which Twitter, Facebook, even the web itself is different from the online world in the 80s is, first of all, just the scale. More is different. When you have a couple thousand people together, you have a village. When you have millions of people, you have a mega city, and the mega city is very different from the village. So there's a scaling issue which has erupted. 500 million people on Facebook, that's larger than most countries. I mean, it's no longer a little village, is what we had. So we were dealing with kind of village issues, and now you're dealing with nation level issues. The second thing that changed was the early 80s, being online took a deliberate effort. You kind of had to go there. You had to travel there in some senses. You had to find a computer, log on, go through the whole rigmarole of commands and stuff, and there you were there. Now you're always on. It's sort of always there. There's almost no travel time. It's like you're not traveling to the country, you're in the country. That makes a difference, the fact that it's 24/7, always on. And I think the other difference is that the dimensions in which you can interact were very limited in the first versions of things, and again, you saw little letters on a screen go down very fast. You actually had to increase your speeding read, because these things would travel 300 baud down, and you became a speed reader. Now you can interact with sharing images of yourself. You can exchange not only documents, but streams of things. And so it's not just a static conversation. And I think those three things, increasing scale, increasing dimensions of interaction, and the increasing frequency and duration in which you're on, make this really basically a whole new medium.
You're interested in the idea of inevitability. Was this inevitable back in the early 80s when you were pioneering this thing? Did you know that Facebook would happen?
That's a really good question. No, I did not think about issues like inevitability back in the 80s. I would have rejected the idea that things were inevitable in the 80s. It's an idea that actually I wish I did not believe, because we don't like to be told that anything is inevitable in the universe. But I think I changed my mind about that as I began to look at the own history of technology and its role in our lives. And I began to realize that, in fact, at the macro level, the larger forms of technology are inevitable, although the particular specific forms, the speciation form of it, the individual expressions of it, are not inevitable. So the fact that it was Facebook versus, say, MySpace, or Facebook at all, is never inevitable. What was inevitable was the fact that we would connect electronically and we would be sharing our lives all the time. That was inevitable. And I think I did feel that we were headed in that way, though I would not have used the word inevitable 20 years ago.
Why do you think we don't like the idea of inevitability?
Well, because we see ourselves as agents of free will, and that is really the core of, I think, ultimately what we think humans and humanity is about the kind of expression and cultivation of free will. And if something's inevitable, it seems, if it really is inevitable, that means we have no choice about what's going to happen. That means that our free will is thwarted. The real fear about inevitability is that what we claim is inevitable is not inevitable, and that we're then just surrendering the responsibility for having choice to something that doesn't deserve it. And so the issue about inevitability that people really have, I think, is really determining whether it really is inevitable or not. I mean, if you look at any kind of science fiction time travel thing, the question they always have is, like, is the future you're showing me the inevitable future or just the possible future?
Was Kevin Kelly inevitable, or is he inevitable? And I don't mean that simply as a joke, because if Kevin Kelly didn't exist, many of us, including myself, would have had to have invented it.
No, I think that individuals, again, at the individual level, individual expressions, none of this is inevitable. None of us are predictable. It's all free will. What is inevitable in terms of, say, the long course of evolution, I believe, is a sentient being with consciousness. That's about what's inevitable. The actual individual expression, my particular mix of genes, your particular mix of environmental background and genes, and our own choices in life are definitely not inevitable. Those are all individualistic, and that's why we have the power and creativity we do, because we're not inevitable.